10. Her gestures grew abrupt and unsteady. 2 years had elapsed since she discovered he was unfaithful, and things had grown worse. There was no way out. Was he genuinely incapable of abandoning his erotic friendships? He was. It would have torn him apart. He lacked the strength to control his taste for other women. Besides, he failed to see the need. No one knew better than he how little his exploits threatened Teresa. Then why give them up? He saw no more reason for that than to deny himself soccer matches. But was it still a matter of pleasure? Even as he set out to visit another woman, he found her distasteful and promised himself he would not see her again. He constantly had Teresa's image before his eyes, and the only way he could erase it was by quickly getting drunk. Ever since meeting Teresa, he had been able to make her love to other women without alcohol. But alcohol in his breath was a sure sign to Teresa of his infidelity. He was caught in a trap, even on his way to see them. He found them distasteful, but one day without him, and he was back on the phone, eager to make contact. He still felt most comfortable with Sabina. He knew she was discreet and would not divulge their rendezvous. Her studio greeted him like a memento of his past, his idyllic bachelor past. Perhaps he himself did not realize how much he had changed. He was now afraid to come home late, because Teresa would be waiting for him. Then one day Sabina caught him glancing at his watch during intercourse and trying to hasten its conclusion. Afterwards, still naked and lazily walking across the studio, she stopped before an easel with a half-finished painting and watched him sidelong as he threw on his clothes. When he was fully dressed except for one bare foot, and he looked around the room, then got down on all fours to continue the search under a table. "You seem to be turning into the theme of all my paintings," she said. The meeting of two worlds, a double exposure, showing through the outline of Tomas the libertine, incredibly the face of a romantic lover, or the other way, through a Tristan, always thinking of his Teresa. I see the beautiful, betrayed world of the libertine. Tomas straightened up and distractedly listened to Sabina's words. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "A sock." She searched all over the room with him, and again he got down on all fours to look under the table. "Your sock isn't anywhere to be seen," said Sabina. "You must have come without it." "How could I have come without it?" cried Tomas, looking at his watch. "I wasn't wearing only one sock when I came, was I? It's not out of the question. You've been very absent-minded lately, always rushing somewhere, looking at your watch. It wouldn't be a surprise in the least if you forgot to put on a sock." He was just about to put on his shoe, barefoot. "It's cold out," Sabina said. "I'll lend you one of my stockings." She handed him a long, white, fashionable, wide-net stocking. He knew very well she was getting back at him for glancing at his watch while making love to her. She had hidden his socks somewhere. It was indeed cold out, and he had no choice but to take her up on the offer. He went home wearing a sock on one foot and a wide-net stocking rolled down over his ankle on the other. He was in a bind. In his mistress's eyes he bore the stigma of his love for Teresa, in Teresa's eyes the stigma of his exploits with his mistresses. 11. To assuage Teresa's sufferings, he married her. He could finally give up the room which she had not lived in for quite some time, and gave her a puppy. It was born to a St. Bernard owned by a colleague. The sire was a neighbor's German shepherd. No one wanted the little mongrels, and his colleague was loath to kill them. Looking over the puppies, Tomas knew the ones he rejected would have to die. He felt like the President of the Republic standing before 4 prisoners condemned to death and empowered to pardon only one of them. At last he made his choice. A dog whose body seemed reminiscent of the German shepherd and whose head belonged to its St. Bernard mother. He took it home to Teresa, who picked it up and pressed it to her breast. The puppy immediately peed on her blouse. Then they tried to come up with a name for him. Tomas wanted the name to be a clear indication that the dog was Teresa's, and he thought of the book she was clutching under her arm when she arrived unannounced in Prague. He suggested they call the puppy Tolstoy. "It can't be Tolstoy," Teresa said. "It's a girl. How about Anna Karenina?" "It can't be Anna Karenina," said Tomas. "No woman could possibly have so funny a face. It's much more like a Karenin." "Yes, Anna's husband. That's just how I've always pictured him." But won't calling her Karenin affect her sexuality?" "It's entirely possible," said Tomas, "that a female dog addressed continually by a male name will develop lesbian tendencies." Strangely enough, Tomas's words came true. Though female dogs are usually more affectionate to their masters than to their mistresses. Karenin proved an exception, deciding that he was in love with Teresa. Tomas was grateful to him for it. He would stroke the puppy's head and say, "Well done, Karenin. That's just what I wanted for you. Since I can't cope with her by myself, you must help me." But even with Karenin's help, Tomas failed to make her happy. He became aware of his failure some years later, on approximately the 10th day after his country was occupied by Russian tanks. It was August 1968, and Tomas was receiving daily phone calls from a hospital in Zurich. The director there, a physician who had struck up a friendship with Tomas at an international conference, was worried about him and kept offering him a job. 12. If Tomas rejected the Swiss doctor's offer without a second thought, it was for Teresa's sake. He assumed she would not want to leave. She had spent the whole first week of the occupation in a kind of trance almost resembling happiness. After roaming the streets with her camera, she would hand the rolls of film to foreign journalists who actually fought over them. Once, when she went too far back and took a close-up of an officer pointing his revolver at a group of people, she was arrested and kept overnight at Russian military headquarters. There they threatened to shoot her, but no sooner did they let her go than she was back in the streets with her camera. That is why Tomas was surprised when on the 10th day of the occupation she said to him, "Why is it you don't want to go to Switzerland? Why should I? They could make it hard for you there." "They can make it hard for anybody," replied Tomas with a wave of the hand. "What about you? Could you live abroad?" "Why not? You've been out there risking your life for this country. How can you be so nonchalant about leaving it?" "Now that Dubček is back, things have changed," said Teresa. It was true. The general euphoria lasted no longer than the first week. The representatives of the country had been hauled away like criminals by the Russian army. No one knew where they were. Everyone feared for the men's lives, and hatred for the Russians drugged people like alcohol. It was a drunken carnival of hate. Czech towns were decorated with thousands of hand-painted posters bearing ironic texts, epigrams, poems, and cartoons of Brezhnev and their soldiers, jeered at by one and all as a circus of illiterates, but no carnival can go on forever. In the meantime, the Russians had forced the Czech representatives to sign a compromise agreement in Moscow. When Dubček returned with them to Prague, he gave a speech over the radio. He was so devastated after his 6-stage detention, he could hardly talk. He kept stuttering and gasping for breath, making long pauses between sentences, pauses lasting nearly 30 seconds. The compromise saved the country from the worst. The executions and mass deportations in Siberia that had terrified everyone. But one thing was clear: the country would have to bow to the conqueror. Forever and ever it will stutter, stammer, gasp for air like Alexander Dubček. The carnival that was over. Workaday humiliation had begun. Teresa had explained all this to Tomas, and he knew that it was true, but also he knew that underneath it hid still another, more fundamental truth. The reason why she wanted to leave Prague. She had never really been happy before. The days she walked through the streets of Prague taking pictures of Russian soldiers and looking danger in the face were the best of her life. They were the only time when the television series of her dreams had been interrupted, and she had enjoyed a few happy nights. The Russians had brought equilibriums to her in their tanks, and now that the carnival was over, she feared her nights again and wanted to escape them. She now knew there were conditions under which she could feel strong and fulfilled, and she longed to go off into the world and seek those conditions somewhere else. "It doesn't bother you that Sabina has also immigrated to Switzerland?" Tomas asked. Geneva isn't Zurich," said Teresa. "She'll be much less of a difficulty there than she was in Prague. A person who longs to leave the place where he lives is a unhappy person." That is why Tomas accepted Teresa's wish to immigrate, as the culprit accepts his sentence, and one day he and Teresa and Karenin found themselves in the largest city in Switzerland, 13. He bought a bed for their empty flat. They had no money yet for other furniture, and threw himself into his work with the frenzy of a man of 40 beginning a new life. He made several telephone calls to Geneva. A show of Sabina's work had opened there by chance a week after the Russian invasion, and a wave of sympathy for her tiny country. Geneva's patrons of the arts brought up all her paintings. "Thanks to the Russians, I'm a rich woman," she said. Laughing into the telephone, she invited Tomas to come see her new studio, and assured him that it did not differ greatly from the one he had known in Prague. He would have been only too glad to visit her, but was unable to find an excuse to explain his absence to Teresa, and so Sabina came to Zurich. She stayed at a hotel. Tomas went to see her after work. He phoned first in the reception desk, then went upstairs. When she opened the door, she stood before him on her long, beautiful legs, wearing nothing but panties and a bra, and a black bowler hat. She stood there staring, mute and motionless. Tomas did the same. Suddenly he realized how touched he was. He removed the bowler from her head and placed it on the bedside table. Then they made love without saying a word. Leaving the hotel for his flat, which by now had acquired table, chairs, couch, and a carpet, he thought happily that he carried his way of living with him as a snail carries his house. Teresa and Sabina represented the two poles of his life, separate and irreconcilable, yet equally appealing. But the fact that he carried his life support system with him everywhere like a part of his body meant that Teresa went on having her dreams. They had been in Zurich for 6 or 7 months when he came home late one evening to find a letter on the table telling him she had left for Prague. She had left because she lacked the strength to live abroad. She knew she was supposed to bolster him up, but did not know how to go about it. She had been silly enough to think that going abroad would change her. She thought after that she had been through during the invasion, she would stop being petty and grow up, grow wise and strong, but she had overestimated herself. She was weighing him down and would do so no longer. She had drawn the necessary conclusions before it was too late, and she apologized for taking Karen with her. He took some sleeping pills, but still did not close his eyes until morning. Luckily, it was Saturday, and he could stay at home. For the 150th time, he went over the situation. The borders between his country and the rest of the world were no longer open. No telegrams or telephone calls could bring her back. No authorities would ever let her travel abroad. Her departure was staggeringly definitive.